So hello and welcome. So thank you for being here, whether in person or online. We have quite a few people online, but I don't know if you can see them. just telling you. For today's climate fiction seminar. So this seminar is part of the FORESEE program's Climate Fictions project. The FORESEE program explores the experiences of individuals, organizations, territories, and public action in the face of climate change. And so the Climate Fictions project, co-led by myself and James Dalrymple, is part of Axis 1 of the FORESEE program, which focuses on individuals facing climate change. So this project explores different types of climate fiction, both in literature and in the visual arts, from an anglophone perspective, with an emphasis on the representation of individuals facing climate change. So during this seminar, we will have the pleasure of listening to Elisabetta Di Minico, whom I had the pleasure of meeting in Milan at the end of last year during the Sogni Elettrici Electric Dreams International Science Fiction Film Festival, which she co-organizes every year at Ulm University. And I'm very happy to have been able to invite her today. So I'll let Lisa introduce Elisabetta. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Hello Elisabetta. So I'm going to introduce Elisabetta. So over the past decade, Elisabetta Di Minico has developed a thought-provoking research profile spanning the humanities and social sciences, focusing on dystopia, otherness, power, and social and political violence. Her work examines how literature, film, TV series, and comics reflect and interrogate urgent, contemporary issues such as authoritarianism, systemic injustice, gender and racial violence, ecological collapse, and the fragility of democracy. Between 2022 and 2025, she was a Marie Sklodowska-Curie postdoctoral fellow at the Complutense University of Madrid, where her project, The Enmity of Otherness, analyzed how dystopian narratives reveal the mechanisms of political enmity and the use of the other to justify exclusion and repression. Since earning her PhD in contemporary history at the University of Barcelona in 2015, she has authored over 20 publications in English, Spanish, Italian, and Catalan, including the monograph Il futuro in bilico in 2018, used as a textbook in several Italian universities. She has presented her research at more than 60 international events across over 15 countries, including Harvard University, the University of Sydney, Seoul National University, and Scuola Normale Superiore. Public engagement is central to her work. Since 2022, she has curated, as Marie said earlier, Electric Dreams, a science fiction film festival in Milan, and organized dystopian film cycles, literary festivals, book launches, and public debates. She has appeared as a guest at numerous festivals, collaborated on documentaries, radio and TV programs, podcasts and live streams, and served on juries for literary awards. Elisabetta, we are listening to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you to Marie, James, and thank you to you, Lisa. So let's start. In The Ecology of Freedom, Murray Bookchin states that the domination of nature by man stems from the real domination of human by human, underlying that discriminated behaviors such as racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, ableism are connected to the same greed and lust for power and advantages that justify the destruction and the capitalization of the environment. By exposing privileges, double standards, social injustice, and mechanisms of exploitation, the processes that lead to the biopolitical hierarchization of the social and individual bodies have been and continue to be influenced by colonialism, patriarchy, and economy. And they are similar to the processes that exploit nature and animal, guided by a logic that seeks the maximization of profit above ethics and morality. Quoting Bookchin again, as long as the hierarchy persists, as long as the domination organizes humanity around a system of elites, the project of dominating nature will continue to exist and inevitably lead our planet to ecological extinction. We are ruled by a system that Fraser defined as cannibal capitalism, not a type of economy, but a type of society that authorizes an officially designed economy to pile up monetized values for investor and owners while devouring the non-economized wealth of everyone else. Serving that wealth on a platter to corporate classes, this society invites them to make a meal of our creative capacities and also of the capacity of the earth that sustain us, with no obligation to replenish what they consume or repair what they damage. Nature, animals, and individuals who do not fit into the normative categories of the status quo, including minorities, immigrants, women, or the homeless, become elements of crisis, bearers of conflict and instability on the margin of society. Otherness is dehumanized, marginalized, feared, and hated. It must be limited, oppressed, cancelled, or assimilated, devalued through propaganda or language, or silenced. However, it can always be exploited for the benefit of the ruling power. Hegemonic humanity does not recognize the pain it causes, designs a utopia for those who reflect the face of power, normally white, privileged, men, heterosexual, and let everyone else draw in a dystopia. The utopia genre was created by Thomas More in his famous 1516 work, but it has its roots in religion, mythology, and folklore. Just think about Earthly Paradise, Atlantis, the Fortunate Islands, Avalon, and many, many more. Utopia is a genre that describes an ideal or idyllic form of government and community. As Levitas states, it is the expression of the desire for a better way of living, which, according to Moylan, creates hopeful counter-worlds, inclusive and empowering socio-political and cultural realities. Mieville defines these places as an archipelago of dissident and hope, constructed and desired out of a need for recognition, social improvement, otherness, and relief from evil and injustice. However, in order to realize a utopia, there is always a risk of exploitation, marginalization, and destruction, because utopia, always according to Mieville, can be toxic and may end up becoming complicit with oppressive power, with imperialism, colonialism, neoliberalism, capitalism, and authoritarianism. An earthly paradise may be built next to a concentration camp, as shown in Glaser 2023 film The Zone of Interest, which portrays the idyllic life of the Auschwitz commandant Rudolf Hoss family in a wealthy and happy house with a garden and flowers, just steps away from one of the symbolic sides of the annihilating horror of Nazism. Quoting Kundera, once the dream of paradise starts to turn into reality, here and there people begin to crop up who stand in its way, and so the rulers of paradise must build a little gulag on the side of Eden. The boundary between utopia and dystopia, between the good place and the bad place, is fragile, blurred. As Le Guin notes, all utopias have been, explicitly or implicitly, in fact or in potential, depending on the criteria of the author or the readers, both a good place and a nightmare. Every utopia contains a dystopia, every dystopia contains a utopia. It depends on the perspective, the political thoughts, the color of the skin, the social classes, the gender, the species. Just think about the violence against colonized people for the benefit of the colonizer, the idyllic supremacist promises of slavery, segregation, apartheid, the Shoah, and other, including actual genocidal attempts. The rhetoric of unity, purity, protection, and family values in populist and far-right political narratives, which in reality justify restriction on civil rights for women and LGBTQ communities. The exaltation of security that supports systemic racism and anti-immigration policies responsible for abuse, detention, family separation, and deaths at the borders. The moving and heroic struggles for freedom and security of Western wars in the Middle East while annihilating entire nations. the reassuring promises of efficiency and abundance upheld by brutal intensive animal farming, or the celebrated logic of endless growth and consumer satisfaction that causes deforestation, pollution, fast fashion, and hyperproduction, and transforms ecosystems, material and human and non-human life into disposable goods that sustain the illusion of progress and collective prosperity. Dystopia, the description of the bad place, is a negative response to utopia, and at the same time constitutes a profound critique of existing social condition and political system. It offers a representation of contemporary society and its power relations, in which bodies, geography, and culture are political, social, and economic factors that ultimately reflect the community to which they belong. If the context is infected, they will embody and exacerbate the infection. Baccolini and Moylan emphasize the strong social critique of dystopia and its invitation to resist all forms of discriminatory power. The dystopian imagination served as a prophetic vehicle for writers with an ethical and political concern, warning us about terrible social political tendencies. By analyzing dystopian narratives, we can identify recurring structure and strategy. Quoting Baccolini and Moylan again, the official and hegemonic order of mass dystopia, as Antonio Gramsci suggested, it based both on coercion and consent. And it constructs the public and private body of society through mechanisms ranging from fear, violence, and pain, to propaganda, sense of belonging, and manipulated needs tied to pleasure, aesthetics, materialism, and comfort. Dystopia, both real and fictional, proliferate through surveillance, materialism, fear, statism, and uniformity, because in order to survive, to govern, and to prevent rebellion, it requires not only, quoting Foucault, useful and docile bodies, but also individuals who are aesthetically and ideologically similar. To repress the difference, power must first produce conformity. Otherness is denied the same rights as the good, productive, obedient, and sexually, racially, and religiously correct segment of the dominant society. At times, it is not even recognized as intelligent or sensitive. Dystopia rigorously organizes its space and exploits linguistic and psychophysical submission to repress or manipulate its population, adapting individuals to its social, ethical, and political norms, while excluding, criminalizing, and repressing the non-aligned and marginalized. People become territories to be shaped, invaded, and conquered. By limiting language, power still curates only the concept and messages it deems necessary, eventually eradicated unwanted ideas. By limiting bodies, it produces ideal citizens and portrays otherness as a dangerous element of the social practice, thereby justifying the marginalization and elimination of diversity. By controlling space, power displays its grandeur, monitors its citizens, and identifies enemies, turning places and environment into extension, both real and symbolic, of its authority. Space, therefore, holds not only a geographical value, but also socio-political, economic, cultural, textual, and metaphorical significance. This seminar aims to critically examine the dystopian drift of and utopian alternative to hegemonic capitalism and its set of structural oppression within contemporary society, using Marge Piercy's Woman on the Edge of Time as a point of departure. By embedding its fictional themes with broader socio-political, ecological, and feminist critique, the novel's imaginative vision addressed systemic injustice by examining the intersectionality between gender, race, and class, and highlighting how these categories interact and mutually influence each other. Originally related to racism and black feminism, the term intersectionality was coined in 1989 by critical race theory scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. Since then, quoting Gained, it has broadened to include the intersection between other forms of inequality, such as homophobia, transphobia, ableism, classism, and more. Because, through the word of Il Collins, racism, sexism, class exploitation, and similar oppression may mutually construct one another. Applying an intersectional lens to Piercy's work, the portraits of otherness in Woman on the Edge of Times reveal powerful reflections. The novel's real and fictional dystopian society are shaped by multiple interconnected and interdependent levels of discrimination, exploitation, and domination. Marge Piercy is an American author, poet, and feminist activist, and the recipient of the Arthur C. Clarke Award in 1993 for He, She, and It, a cyberpunk novel that tells the story of the impossible love between the human Shira and the cyborg Yod, and of their struggle against the multinational corporation that hierarchically and oppressively governs society. Piercy wrote Woman on the Edge of Time in 1976. According to Booker, the work reflects some of the utopian optimism of the women movements of that era, although it has a significantly dark side. Piercy denounces patriarchy, racism, social injustice, and environmental pollution in contemporary society, playing with utopia and dystopia, and imagining two possible futures for the world. The protagonist of the story is Connie Ramos, a Chicana living in Spanish Harlem, a poor New York neighborhood where maltreatments, gender-based violence, prostitution, and drugs are common and almost contagious. Her life has been marked by trauma, violence, and marginalization. She embodies multiple rejected forms of otherness. She is a poor woman of Latin American origins. In a world dominated and ruled by men, white people, and wealthy elites, this identity becomes a liability. Connie is the epitome, quotic symbol, of the modern working-class woman, victim of multiple abuses such as racism and domestic violence, who suffers from financial hardship, troubled marriage, and single motherhood, and who struggle against a system of ideology that views her as naturally irrational. After an altercation with Geraldo, the brutal pimp and lover of her niece Dolly, a young addict forced into prostitution, she is diagnosed with violent paranoid schizophrenia and unjustly locked up into an asylum, where doctors try to surgically control her impulses through brain implants. In this institution, Connie encounters other discordant identity, who, just like her, are imprisoned not only because of their real or presumed mental disorders, but because of their inability to conform to the dominant system, because of the color of their skin, their sexual preferences, their social background, and their anger against an unjust society. Indeed, according to Joannon, the fact that Connie holds the state of New York responsible for the death in prison of her black boyfriend is seen as confirmation of her madness. During her hospitalization, Connie is isolated from the external world and has limited interaction with the internal community and oppressive relations with the medical staff. The description of the asylum are horrific and insist on the place's darkness, filthiness, and desperation, symbolically materializing the injustice suffered by Connie through a suffocating frame. When in seclusion, for example, she is stuck into a hole with no doors and no windows, a desperate spot with no way out, reflecting the protagonist's life. Filled with names, dates, words scratched somehow into the wall with blood and fingernails, this empty room is a constant memory of the abuses perpetrated in it, and a gate to hell for alienated and disadvantaged people, betrayed by fate, family, and institutions. Through Connie's devastating experience of isolation and debasement, Piercy not only moves a critique against the treatment of mental illness and on the medicalization of social problems, but she also uses protagonist pains as a metaphorical representation of discrimination and marginalization of otherness, women, queer people, minorities, or underprivileged individuals. Connie is an invisible and unexpected heroine, while the novel powerful figures, both men and white women, are abusive, merciless, or indifferent to the pain felt by the outcasts. They decide and impose on inferior citizens their thoughts and their rules. Embodying a judgmental and discriminatory authority, doctors, social workers, and other institutional figures refuse to hear and help Connie during her entire life, even coming to psychophysical harm the protagonist. Connie is sterilized against her will because residents wanted practice. Her daughter Angelina is taken away from her after an episode of maltreatment and adopted with devious methods by a rich white family. The men in Connie's life are violent, oppressive, belittling, or dead. Her father was a statistic beater, while her brother Luis is greedy and dominant and agrees with her hospitalization. Connie's college professor, Everett Sylvester, who enjoyed having Spanish-speaking secretary, offensively nicknamed Chiquitas, used this position to sleep with her, establishing a relationship that was a sort of gentle slavery. Eddie, the father of her daughter Angelina, raped and often beat her, also causing her an abortion. The list of positive men is restricted to 2 deceased partners. Martin was her first husband. He made her feel protected, worthy, and loved. But he died after being stabbed. Also, pickpocket Claude cared about her, but he died in prison. After a medical experimentation on hepatitis vaccine, he officially volunteered for. Many of the other marginalized characters show a similar desolate fate as Connie's. They try to find their place into a world that do not valorize or support them, ending up as broken subjects, disengaged from society and in need of being fixed, although their damage is inflicted by social imbalance and rejection. As already mentioned, Dolly, Connie's niece, is an addicted prostitute beaten up by her pimp lover Geraldo. Marianna, Connie's mother, had an unnecessary hysterectomy after a difficult pregnancy and was emotionally rejected by his husband, who considered it no longer a woman, an empty shell. Her sister Inez received fake contraceptive pills from a doctor who was experimenting on her and got her pregnant with her 7th child, a disabled boy. In the asylum, Connie meets sensitive and intelligent patients, tormented for their nonconformity, as Captain Cream, Alice, Skip, and Sybil. Captain Cream is a low-level bookmaker from Trinidad who believes himself to be a superhero. Rebellious, happy, and fierce Alice undergoes surgery that eradicates her identity and personality, transforming her, quoting Piercy, into a toy, a puppet, a laboratory monkey. Rejected by his rich family that tries to cure his homosexuality, Skip is a young gay man with suicide tendencies that eventually kills himself. Considering herself a witch, Sybil is an extravagant and combative woman who supports women independence, telling them how to heal themselves and encouraging them to leave their husbands. Sybil rejects sex because she interprets intercourses as an invasion. She recognized a sort of physical and conceptual vulnerability of women in relationship, refusing, quoting the novel again, to be a dumb hole people push things in or rub against. These characters are categorized as monsters, and they are forced to consider themselves as such, to diminish their identity and to humiliatingly confront themselves with impossible standards of success and integration. They are victims of an outrageous injustice and prejudices, otherness, indigence, desperation, oddity, misconduct, social and political activism, sexual preferences became psychiatric illnesses and crimes, emphasized by the environment people came from, seen as an addition aggravating factor. While hospitalized in the dissociative space of the asylum, Connie, being very receptive and empathetic, begins to communicate with an androgynous and queer figure from the future, named Luciente, who guides her toward awareness and rebellion against the system. Luciente shows her Matapoiset, an ecotopia where the 17 major socio-political problems, including patriarchy, racism, pollution, unrestrained consumerism, have been resolved. Regrettably, utopia is not the only alternative for Earth. There is also a dystopian version where women are property of men, nature is contaminated and toxic, and population is controlled, drugged, and repressed by multinational corporations. Luciente explained to Connie that the future will be shaped by the choices made in the present by certain chosen individuals, such as the protagonist. So the future is not decided yet, And to support the creation of Mattapoiset, Connie poisons the medical staff that embodies oppression, power, and dystopia. She will be almost surely indicted and possibly lobotomized, but at least she is sure she has fought for a better future. The novel's ending remains deliberately ambiguous, leaving the reader uncertain whether Luciente is real or just a projection of Connie's mind. Opposed to Connie's real space of control and domination, the future agrarian and collectivist utopia of Mattapoiset has completely overcome the oppressive and limiting differences of class, gender, and race, as well as exploitation, privilege, discrimination, materialism, and pollution. Connie becomes part of Luciente's large family. She discovers a non-violent and cooperative society where reproduction is mechanized and relationships are polyamorous, with an affected family unit composed by 3 queer members. Using eugenics, gender differences have been leveled and racial differences blended to create a new mixed ethnicity. Quoting Piercy, Mattapoiset breeded a high portion of dark-skinned people and mixed the genes well through the population. When Connie visits Mattapoiset for the first time, she doesn't expect a rural village. Future is not a sci-fi reality. There are no skyscrapers, flying cars, or spaceships. It is an ecotopia without big cities. Mattapoiset is an harmonious, self-sufficient green paradise, a bucolic village with 600 people, many happy and funny animals, idyllic landscape with garden, forest, rivers, and few buildings. Moreover, Mattapoiset perfectly uses technology to protect the environment. They have, for example, advanced recycle systems, rainwater tanks, solar energy, and also to enhance humanity, destroying gender inequality, biological determinism, racism, and poverty. In Mattapoiset, everyone has plenty of physical and personal space to meditate, think, compose songs, sleep, study. There is a close and balanced correlation between nature and people, and citizens appear to be very respectful and caring for each other and for all the living creatures. Mattapoiset Ecotopia engage with the concept of locus amenus, an idealized setting in which humanity lives in harmony with nature, a lush, enchanted garden reminiscent of the earthly paradise or of Ogygia, the island where Calypso lived and welcomed Odysseus in Book 5 of the Odyssey. From its very beginning, this has been one of the most central and powerful leitmotifs of utopian imagination. So Mattapoiset can be read in continuity with earlier utopian tradition. Also recalling Moore's utopia and its perfectly maintained houses and fragrant, beautifully arranged gardens, Mattapoiset's space echoes the same aesthetic and ethical principle that underpin Morris' News from Nowhere. A peaceful integration of architecture and nature and a rejection of industrial excess in favor of simplicity, craftsmanship, and ecological balance. English artist, writer, and socialist activist William Morris was one of the central figures of the arts and craft movement. Opposing the poor quality and trivialization of industrial capitalism and upholding human creativity, the artisanal reform of this 19th century movement pursued beauty, uniqueness, functionality, and ecological stability, paying meticulous attention to details and the quality of materials. News from Nowhere recounts the dreamlike journey of the socialist militant William Guest into a future London. In the year 2000, the polluted, unpleasant, and unjust city of the 19th century has become a perfect, happy agrarian and anarchic utopia, without private property, state institutions, money, courts, or prisons. Individual rights and freedoms are guaranteed, including, to some extent, women's rights. The population lives in harmony and friendship. Nature is respected and protected, and cities are clean and refined. Art and the pursuit of beauty have enabled society to evolve, to materialize this utopian ideal. Every element of future London is enchanted, from public spaces, buildings and gardens, to clothing, furniture, and domestic objects. Morris' narrative is nostalgic, and looks back to the rural past before the Industrial Revolution. Yet it projects its utopian imagination towards, quoting Gilbert, an idealized future in which wonderful people coexist simply and happily amid lush gardens, open fields, and attractive houses. Morris' utopia is confined into a dream, and when Williams wakes up, he finds himself still surrounded by ugliness, exploitation, alienation, and the sterile and oppressive power of capitalism. But for Piercy, Mattapoiset is not lost into an oniric dimension. It represents a possible positive future alternative. Mattapoiset reflects Bookchin theory. The feminist, anti-racist, and ecotopian village is the answer to Western society obsession with hierarchy, profit, and power. It mediates between nature and technology and suggests that the solution for political and environmental crises is a radical change in the organization of society through social ecology, urban decentralization, measures of self-sufficiency, and face-to-face democracy. Opposing to Mattapoiset ecotopia, in the dystopian alternative that may await humanity, all the structural injustice of reality, rather than being resolved, as in Luciente's words, are horrifically intensified. Future New York is a dreadful evolution of contemporaneity, a corrupted megacity, a land of oppression and injustice that vertically separate classes and physically and symbolically represent architectural stratification as an exemplification of tyrannical power, evoking Fritz Lang Metropolis or Neil Blomkamp Elysium. The deterioration of space is directly related to the decay of society. Recalling Connie asylum confinement, people don't have freedom of movement nor any other rights. The environment is lethally polluted. Nature doesn't exist anymore. Air is so thick and contaminated that it's impossible to see through it. And food is made from coal, algae, and wood byproducts. The riches live up in the sky in a wonderful space platform with clean air, while the rest of the people are doomed to barely survive on a devastated and toxic earth. The poor are exploited in every possible way, including through organ trafficking. And while lower classes people die around the age of 40, the elite can live up to 200 years, thanks to surgery and organ ripped from the indigent. To handle solitude, lack of affection, sadness, insomnia, and other similar indispositions, New Yorkers take a lot of drugs, as in Huxley's Brave New World. This society is not controlled by charismatic leaders, as the Big Brothers in Orwell 1984, but it is dominated by multinational corporations that have replaced nations and literally own citizens. Women are exploited and categorized for their use, as in Atwood The Handmaid's Tale, where they are rigidly classified into hierarchical roles that reduce them to their biological and social function, including wives, servants called Marthas, prostitutes called Jezebels, and handmaids, fertile women who are regularly raped, forced to bear children, and then leave them to the commander's family. During her visit into this locus horribilis, Connie meets a contract girl, Gildina, in a windowless apartment in a segregated and surveilled complex, similar to her secluded room into the asylum. In Connie's word, women often experience sexuality as a power relation and a source of oppression. It seems that they cannot freely enjoy and use their sexuality, depending on male desires and paying a price for intercourses. As Connie is abandoned by her boyfriend Chuck, rejected by her family, and forced to leave university after an unwanted pregnancy that ends up with an abortion without anesthetics. This is even more evident in the future New York. Gildina embodies a hypersexualized dystopia. She is a dull woman who lives in a misogynist reality where sexual slavery, assured by temporary contracts, has replaced marriage, and where women's identity is destroyed in order to be reconstructed and chained to denigrating values of beauty and submissive behavior. Female bodies are extremely modified to satisfy male fantasies, materializing fetishism and erotic perversions. With large breasts, very thin waist, and small feet, Gildina is, quoting the novel, a cartoon of femininity, cosmetically fixed for sex use. She is so physically imbalanced that she can barely walk or escape. But since she has no personal identity or awareness, Gildina doesn't recognize the trivialization and the alteration of her body as a form of violence. The commodification is completely accepted, and there are probably no alternative of independent models of women. Moreover, reconfirming Piercy's will to attack both patriarchal oppression and racial persecution of otherness, one of Gildina's characteristics is her lightened skin, a racist principle imposed on epidermis, implying that this future interpretation of beauty means pallor and means whiteness. Sexual workers are hired just for pleasure. Pregnancy are generally not included in their contracts. Another group of women is relegated to reproductive labor. Maternity is reserved for, nomen omen, the moms, described by Gildina as fat women called to make babies all the time. This dichotomy that anticipates the separation between handmaids and Jezebel in The Handmaid's Tale and wives and concubines in Louise O'Neill Only Ever Yours echoes a heavy double standard that generally imposes a separation between motherhood and uncensored and free female sexuality, between nurturing tradition and sins, between virginal ideals of caretaking and carnal desires. After all, the sexual woman is not a breeder need not orgasm. Desired, imposed, or denied, maternity is a fundamental value in society. Being a good mother is the most important and praised feminine characteristic, the aspect that most defines women's role and identity, and also a judgment parameter for society. Quoting Gilligan, women not only define themselves in context of human relationships, but also judge themselves in terms of their ability to care. For Connie, maternity is both a source of joy and satisfaction and a site of oppression. Connie is a mother, but she is a bad mother, a barren mother, estranged from her child and deprived of her uterus. She has lost the only prize she ever had, and this inability further tears her life down. In Connie's reality and in Gildina's future, the female identity is shaped and sometimes condemned by sexuality, motherhood, economic condition, and race. Instead, in Luciente's world, these elements have no negative impact on women. As anticipated, in Mattapoiset there are no poverty, races, or binary division of roles and genders, similarly to what happened in Ursula Le Guin, The Left Hand of Darkness, where Ghetto inhabitants are intersexual. Recalling the hedonistic world state of Huxley's Brave New World, births are entirely artificial. Fetuses are subjected to genetic engineers and raised in structure resembling aquariums. Similarly to the hyper-organized state of Unicomp of Levin's This Perfect Day, or to the homologated and desentimentalized underworld of George Lucas' first movie, THX 1138, Mattapoiset women's and men characteristics have been leveled in favor of androgynous figures. Motherhood, not fatherhood, remains a fundamental concept of society. Children are co-mothered by 3 parents, not necessarily female. Men can also be mothers, and thanks to hormonal therapies, they can even breastfeed. According to Luciente, the mechanization of reproduction represents the only true possibility for emancipation and gender equality, completely freeing women from all the hierarchies. In Luciente's words, we had to give up the only power we ever had, in return for no more power for anyone. The original production, the power to give birth. Because as long as we were biologically enchained, we'll never be equal. and males never will be humanized to be loving and tender. So we all became mothers. This process allows sexuality, love, and maternity to be present as truly free and liberating experiences, not driven by possession. Piercy rewrites dystopian themes such as artificial pregnancies, eugenics, and homologation from a seemingly utopian and empowering perspective. By shaping androgynous subjects of a mixed race and by freeing women from pregnancy and childbirth, Matta-Poiset aims to establish a more inclusive and fair community. Racism cannot exist if race themselves no longer exist. Patriarchy cannot exist if the biological predestination of women to motherhood no longer exists. However, her vision ultimately resists any clear-cut classification and reveals an underlying pessimism. Rather, they're offering a fully emancipatory model and building a future in which every form of otherness has space and dignity. Matta-Poiset chooses to blend differences altogether and expose ambiguous strategies that, while striving for liberation, risk imposing new regimes of biopolitical regulation over bodies and identities. The leveling of gender, sex, and race intends to undo hierarchical and oppressive systems and give voice to otherness, but ends up completely erasing diversity. In this sense, Piercy's future can be read as a critical or ambivalent utopia, one that simultaneously supports post-human emancipation while foregrounds an unsettling uniformity, questioning whether liberation can be ever achieved without some degree of control and manipulation. The novel also reminds us that there is a direct link between the psychophysical abuse and the construction of female gender and the limitation of language. Quoting Russell, women have no possibility of creating their own text because they cannot write their own bodies. According to Booker, as women are expected to mechanically occupy predetermined roles without deviation, they are also expected to speak in mechanical and predetermined way. Matta-Poiset gives voice to anybody and promotes gender equality also on linguistic basis. For example, pronouns are neutral, not gendered. They use per for person. Matta-Poiset sees no division between men and women. It recognizes one social body, composed by bodies standardized, of course, but with unique characters and predisposition behind their sex. In Connie and Girdina's New York, on the contrary, language is a patriarchal, racist, and classist power structure used to indoctrinate citizens and to impose and justify oppression through the repetition of stereotypes, prejudices, and fake news until they are accepted by the majority of the population, even by its mistreated part. When the process is achieved, in fact, also the oppressed subject are brought and forced to speak and interiorize the dominant language. Connie, Gildina, and many other Piercy female or queer characters are not mute, but most of the time it is like they were. They are silenced by an unfair society. Connie is unheard when she is not directly abused by almost everyone with which she relates. She says, "All my life I've been pushed around by my father, by my brother Louis, by schools, by bosses, by cops, by doctors, by lawyers, case workers, and pimps and landlords, by anybody who could push." She lives in a world that promotes the disempowerment of otherness and women, especially not wealthy ones. Reflecting on herself and on society, Connie often uses patriarchal, male, and racial points of view, showing how dominant culture has deeply injected in her mind biases that weaken her identity and self-consideration, also obstructing her possibility of inclusion in that society. Connie perceives herself as an unworthy bag of garbage, as a failure, since she has, quoting the novel, neither baby nor husband, neither diploma or home, no name, no body. Woman spoiled, chingada. Ultimately, there is also a strong connection between power and space. According to Lefebvre, space is neither neutral nor objective. It is a product that reflects social relation, politics, and the ideology of power. According to Castells, space is not a reflection of society, it is directly society. It expresses the interest of the dominant class, excluding peripheral and oppressed subjects, such as exploited workers, tyrannized people, dominated women, as well as oppressed racial, ethnic, and sexual minorities. From a feminist perspective, space is also, according to Messi, linked both directly and indirectly to particular social construction of gender relations. According to Rose, in both democratic and repressive contexts, urban spaces can also reveal gender boundaries and appear masculinized because, through the masculinization of the body politic, public space become a male domain. Recalling real historical systems like Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia, often dystopia words tend to instrumentalize social places, architecture, and the natural world as a tool of domination. In contexts like Gildina, New York, or in the reign of hatred, surveillance, and fear of Orwell 1984, Moore and Lloyd V for Vendetta, Winmer, Equilibrium, space is no longer a site of contact or reciprocity, but a medium through which power, inequality, and marginalization of non-conforming subjects are enforced. Landscapes are degraded, urban spaces are surveilled, stratified, and used to maximize authority, control, and liturgy. So, marginalization is not only social or political, but also spatial, and it reveals how deeply related ecological violence and human oppression are in bad places. Ecological exploitation mirrors and intensifies social hierarchies in fiction and reality. Connie and Gildina spaces are exploited, polluted, and depleted. They are marked by toxic landscape, artificial environment, plastic, and ecological devastation. Nature has been almost entirely erased or reduced to a commodified and controlled resource, reflecting the same system of extraction and dehumanization imposed on marginalized bodies, as Piercy often underlined. Quoting the novel, "Ugliness has surrounded Connie, has imprisoned her all her life. The ugliness of tenements, of slums, of El Barrio, whether of El Paso, Chicago, or New York. The grimy walls, the stinking streets, the stained air, the dark hall smelling of piss or cooking oil, the life like an open sore. This has ground aware as strength. Whoever owned this place, these cities, whoever owned those glittery glassing office buildings in Midtown filled with the pour of money turning over, or those refinery over the river in Jersey with their flames licking the air, they gave nothing back. They took and took and took and left their garbage choking the air, the river, the sea itself, choking her. A life of garbage, human garbage. She had too little of what her body needed and too little of what her soul could imagine. She had been able to do little in the years of her life, and that little has been ill-paid or punished. The rest was garbage. Moreover, to maximize differences between men and women, dystopia often depicts cities explicitly designed by and for men, with women coercively relegated to domestic spaces, ghettos, or oppressive institutions, becoming physically and intellectually invisible. Gildina is trapped in her secluded apartment like the brutalized women of Burdekin's Svastika Night, segregated within a gender-based apartheid under a Nazi dominion, or the women in The Handmaid's Tale, confined to households that function simultaneously as site of surveillance, discipline, and biological control. On the contrary, in utopian realities, the affirmation of social and political justice is supported by a careful protection or even glorification of the environment, as happened in Matapoiset, on the anarchist planet of Anares in Legin the Dispossessed, where ecological scarcity fosters cooperation, fair distribution of resources, and non-exploitative social order, or in The Small Country of Ecotopia, from the homonymous novel by Ernest Callenbach, which imagine a society explicitly reorganized around environmental sustainability, social and personal freedom, and participatory governance. This connection is evident not only in literary works, but also in utopia-inspired concrete experiments and movements as, intentional communities, climate activism as Friday for the Future, community gardens as London Skip Garden or the Brooklyn Grange Rooftop Farm. Now, these are all attempts to reconfigure everyday life through sustainability, localism, and collective responsibility. This real utopia, to borrow the term popularized by Eric Colin Wright, try to materialize alternative socio-ecological models within the present, demonstrating that more equitable, environmentally sustainable, and tangible forms of coexistence are not merely speculative. From an ecofeminist critical perspective, the concept of domination is dangerously eroticized. As Gillarek underlines, in Women on the Edge of Time, body and narrative are invaded by images of penetration that insist on the use of verbs and expression that recall sexual abuses even in non-sexual moments, as, for example, during Connie's surgery. Quoting the novel, "She could hear the drill entering. The pun hung in her penetrated brain." This approach materialized the will of ruling classes to dominate lower classes, to violently fill outcast sociopolitical failings with their power and expertise. According to Michael, quoted by Gillarek, rape is a prevalent metaphor to describe society's violent manipulation of those it considers marginal. So, patriarchal, authoritarian, and/or capitalist power can be understood as the result of a violent cult of hypermasculinity, centered on strength, forcefulness, and domination, and ready to repress women, otherness, and nature simultaneously. Quoting Vandana Shiva, "The marginalization of women and the destruction of nature go hand in hand with the rise of the patriarchal, industrial, and colonial model of development." According to Bookchin, these processes that have turned human beings into alien in nature are directly connected to the injustice that have made many human beings alien in their own social world. The domination of the young by the old, of women by men, and of men by men. Today, as for many centuries in the past, there are still oppressive human beings who literally own society, and others who are owned by it. Until society can be reclaimed by an undivided humanity that will use its collective wisdom, cultural achievement, technological innovation, scientific knowledge, and innate creativity for its own benefit and for that of the natural world, all ecological problems will have their roots in social problems. For this reason, Piercy imagines that the only way out of a society founded on exploitation, discrimination, and toxic masculinity is an eco-matriarchal community that values the nurturing quality not only of women, but also of nature. In utopia and dystopia, as in real life, nature can be primitive and chaotic, and it can be a bearer of apocalypse and catastrophe. However, in many works, it is precisely its opposition to the rigid, controlled spaces of dystopian urbanism and geography that will allow nature to acquire a distinctly positive value, functioning as a protective, idyllic, and safe haven, and as a refuge for unconventional and rebellious values and individuals. In Woman on the Edge of Time, as in many other titles like Zamyatin We or of Iran Anthem, the return to nature does not simply imply a nostalgic Arcadian longing for the past. Rather, it signifies a rejection of control, oppression, and systemic violence. It represents a reappropriation of space and possibility, a reclaiming of autonomy, a restoration of free will, and ultimately, the hope for a better society. In Western thoughts, nature and women have been constantly related. Quoting Plumwood, the logic of dualism, human nature, man, woman, reason, emotion, historically treated women and nature as inferior spheres of bodily necessity to be mastered by the superior sphere of human reason, of male reason. So women have been naturalized, seen as closer as possible to nature and instinct, and nature has been feminized, seen as a passive object of conquest. Nevertheless, it is equally true that this perspective can be reversed, and the woman-nature nexus can be reimagined as a source of power, ethics, and resistance, through which women, from passive victims, may become custodians and agents of care, empathy, and responsibility, capable of fostering new models for a more just and sustainable global politics. As Vandana Shiva argues, women's ecological knowledge and practices of care constitute form of resistance to both patriarchal domination and environmental exploitation, revealing how the defense of nature is inseparable from the struggle for social justice and autonomy. Because, quoting Shiva, the feminine principle is not exclusively embodied in women, but it is a principle of activity and creativity in all nature. Mattapoiset occupies a complex position. It does not simply idealize women as closer to nature, but rather redistributes reproductive, emotional, and ecological labor across bodies and identities, challenging fixed categories while still invoking traditional feminine values such as care and relationality. So, in opposition to real and fictional dystopias, Piercy suggests that the solution to the political and ecological crisis of her time and our time lies in a radical reorganization of society through gender equality, social ecology, economic degrowth, urban decentralization, and direct democracy. Whether it's humanity against nature, one race or class against another, one gender against the others, the narrative of action of violence are always driven by privilege and exploitation. Every injustice differs in its specifics, but they all stem from the same logic of domination and profit. The most significant message of Mattapoiset is the dismantling of the chronic power of predatory capitalism, racism, and patriarchy, through a genuine valorization of otherness, nature, and justice, through empathy, and by the positive embrace of diversity, by recognizing the intersectionality of resistance, because we write the reality of tomorrow every day with every action we take. It will be our call, it will be our choice to build the future as an utopia or as a dystopia. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much
for this inspiring talk. I'm absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about this novel. It's a novel that I studied during my PhD research on feminist dystopias. Although, since it's more of a critical utopia than a textbook dystopia, it wasn't in my main corpus of consideration. So I'm glad that I finally have the opportunity to talk about this in depth. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
First of all. There are so many threads that I would like to explore, but I will have to make choices. So before I let the audience ask questions, I would like to ask one. I would like to focus on the economic structures in both the dystopian reality that is Connie's present, that is now our past, but still our present in a way, and the utopian economic, socio-economic structures of metapoiesis. So I would say that I completely agree with you that it's heavily inspired from Marie Bookchin's communalism, which is thought as a synthesis between a communist redistribution of resources, owning the means, the workers owning the means of production, and thus deciding how production should be organized, and also an anarchist tradition that refuses any kind of central power or state. And so what is very interesting in this novel, in my opinion, is Piercy's attention to detail. She doesn't leave much to imagination. She deals with the technicalities of her utopia to make it very believable. So could you tell us more about this economic organization and how she allows us to really imagine how the economic organization of society can be different?
Piercy is an activist. She tried, as we were saying just before, to think globally and act locally. So she took all the 17 utopian communities' ideals and she concentrated into a utopian world where, as I was saying, talking about Matapaisat a little, they have a slow grow economy. They have abolished consumerism.
Right.
They have created sustainable economy and ecological organization. So they do not waste, they recycle, they use water tanks, they use alternative energy. So basically, I think that the principal critique that Piercy moves is against consumerism. Because if we simply stop to accumulate stuff, we can reconstruct everything. So instead of possess things, we can have times to read. I love the part where Piercy says that people in Matapaisat has time to compose songs. Because it's not the first things I think about, but she deletes the part where we should amass an incredible amount of stuff. We simply should have experiences. We should enjoy life, have time. So it's more, it is true that there is a strong economic analysis, but I also see a philosophical invitation to enjoy the privacy, the relationship, to not simply use an extreme consumerism in our life, and the answer it's really simple. If we do not have all the pollution due to industries, if there is no power above people because all people are equal and everyone received the correct amount of staff, time, and relationships. So there is no reason to this obsession with authority, with money, with possessions. I don't know if this answers your question.
Absolutely, it does. Thank you very much. When I'm listening to you, I'm reminded of a scene where one of the characters, I think, is Jack Rabbit, a figure of an artist. He makes, I think if I remember well, light shows in Matapoisat, says that art is part of the production, but not in a negative utilitarian way, as more as in art is a necessity of life, and so it needs to be incorporated in the economy.
In the
planning
also when they
of
show
our life together.
all the drawings made by kids,
Yes.
they are considered art because it's something the kids produced for the benefit of society. Art is seen as something that people can enjoy, so it has an economic value, not only a cultural.
But you're right
one.
that it has a philosophical and ethical value as well. I'm also reminded now of a scene towards the end of the book where the characters are on the battlefield. Maybe we could talk about the war later because you didn't mention it a lot. But when the characters are on the battlefield and Connie is there by accident, she encounters one of the characters writing a poem on the battlefield, and she says, "What are you doing? Why are you writing a poem now?" And he says, "What else should I be doing?" Per says, "What else should I be doing? I need to be able to express what is going on. This is part of our common task."
Thank you.
All right, so now we can maybe open up the discussion with the audience. Would anyone want to ask a question?
So there's a microphone here, which I'm just turning on so that we can have your voice on the recording as well. Maybe I'll just start with one question since I've got the microphone, and then I'll give it to other people. My first question was about so this is 1970s, the exact date 76. Yeah, and so my first question would be, how does it compare to other science fiction novels written around that same period? And then if it were written today, how different do you think it would be? Would it be very different, or do you think it would be pretty similar? Because you mentioned other contemporary novels that are pretty similar as well. So how would you see it today?
I briefly mentioned that during the 70s, during the 60s and the 70s, there was an utopian movement. If we could summarize the utopian and dystopian movement across the centuries, we can say that utopia was created in the 16th century, and up to the 19th century, the production is mostly utopian. There is something satirical, but there is a desire for writers and to create the perfect society. Since the 19th century, we start to witness dystopia. Dystopia arose as a genre because of the Industrial Revolution, of the aftermath of the French Revolution. So there were a lot of utopian illusions that collapsed. So from the end of the 19th century, let's say up to after the Second World War, the production is strongly dystopian. In the 60s, there is a movement that is connected with the peace movement, with the civil movement in the United States, with the feminist movement, that start to give another shot to utopia. So, as you were saying, One on the Edge of Time is not a classical dystopian books, it's more a critical utopia, and is accompanied by all the Ursula Le Guin production, for example. I say that the Dispossessed, I also say that Ecotopia, both of these novels came from the Dispossessed in 1974, Ecotopia is 1975, so they came just 2 years before Piercy's work. I will say that in the 70s there was this strong hope for a social changing that was again betrayed by society and politics. So from the 80s, 90s, dystopia became again a dominant title. And right now, I will say that we are a little bit in the middle of a changing, because in the last 20 years, dystopia has gained again a strong value. When I started to work on my PhD in 2010, if I remember correctly, I had to explain what dystopia is to almost 19% of the people, non-academic people I was talking to. Right now, it's become a dominant genre also I don't know if I say thanks to or because of the young adult novels. But there is a strong connection between fictional dystopia and real dystopia. Just think about after the Trump won the 2016 election, Orwell 1984 spiked plus 9,500% more. The publisher had to reprint the book because it was sold out in the United States. So people are trying to use dystopia as a way to analyze their society and to understand a little bit better the social political processes that are in it. But it is also true that in the last, I would say, 5 years, there is a strong reclaiming on utopia. There is also the solar punk genre that is climbing the dystopian walls. I haven't studied solar punk in depth, but I read something, and I know a lot of people in Italy who are working on it. And you also met Francesco Verso at Sogni Elettrici. So I will say that right now maybe Piercy's word will not be so different, because I feel like we are in the same situation of the 60s and the 70s. We are surrounded by dystopia, but there is also a strong push for utopia, for movement. The United States were blocked, stuck in a movement and path, I will say, in the last years. But now we are seeing a lot of people reclaiming manifestation, utopian communities in attempt to reconnect humanity, to reclaim empathy, to protect environment. Also because on the other side of the wall, there are people that are destroying not only our environment, but our emotion, our capacity to read and analyze stuff, because we are drowning in fake news, post-truth, propaganda, and we are start losing rights. This is a moment in which we have to fight for rights that seem to be already guaranteed for all the levels of the population. It's not like that. So we need to fight, and in order to fight, we need utopia again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this paper. It was really interesting, and I didn't know anything about this utopian text, so thank you so much. So I have two questions, actually. The first one is about what you said in terms of the way women are portrayed as being freed from pregnancy and birthing in the novel. The fact that eugenics is portrayed as something that's emancipatory, and also how artificial pregnancy kind of helps women become more equal to men. So as far as I understand, this is portrayed as something positive in the novel, right? And I kind of feel like this wouldn't be received today the same way, or at least it is something that's quite ambivalent, right? So I was wondering, because you were talking about the fact that there's also this sort of, erasure of gender, or the gender binary, and that is also portrayed as something positive in the novel. So I was kind of wondering how, so that's my first question, I guess. What do you think about the way we would receive this today? And also, how can we understand this ambivalence between the fact that on the one hand, she negates the gender binary. You also talked about the pronouns they use, right, which is neutral. And the fact that at the end you also mentioned the fact that she also values and promotes female qualities, women qualities as being nurturing, caring, just like nature. So my first question is about this ambivalence. How do you understand it in the novel, and how can we understand it as we read it, this sort of ambiguous relationship between gender in the novel?
I have to be... I do not actually like most of Mata Poison's ideas. Because as I was saying, Piercy presents the erasing of differences as something powerful. Yeah. It is clearly really provocative, and there is also a part, I guess I mentioned, where men can breastfeed. So Mata Poison is created to shock the readers. But and I imagine a lot of stories in Mata Poison from a dystopian point of view. I think two people in love that try to escape from Mata Poison because they want to raise a family of their own, or I don't know. It's a game. Piercy plays with utopia and dystopia. She simply says the solution, the situation right now in the 70s is so terrible that this way of erasing otherness is preferable. And in doing so, I think she wants more to underline the real dystopian action and systems in the 70s than the utopian possibility of Mata Poison. Also because, and I do not think this is by accident, she uses exactly all the dystopian elements of other novels like Brave New World, We by Zamyatin, for example. There are a lot of novels that employ eugenics, homologation, as a form of oppression, not as a form of empowering. But Piercy is saying us that the situation is so unbelievably corrupt and toxic in our world that maybe homologation, eugenics, maybe ripping off women's possibility of giving birth is the only solution to give them equality. It's really provocative, and I think it's a little bit pessimistic also of her to create this society. I do not think that Mata Poison is 100% utopian, and I think it's more a game she plays with the readers.
Right.
So because the creation of women, there are no women. There are androgynous queer figures. Like there are no race. There is a mixed race. So basically, she is saying us that the only way to have gender equality, the only way to not have racism, is to erase differences. Because if they persist, we will never be equal. And there is just a little bit of utopian that it's all a dystopian analysis.
And at the same time, she explicitly values female qualities, such as, you talked about the notion of care, of nurturing. So does she portray these qualities as female, or are they also, gender neutral or androgynous, or?
Yeah, but she is clearly using she has feminized nature, humanity, almost everything. I think it's a really provocative way of analyzing our world. We have to reclaim a complete annihilation of differences to be part of the game.
Thank you. Yeah.
I agree with you that there is definitely a provocative element. And I think that what makes the novel not a utopian proposition, but a critical utopia is the point of view chosen. That is to say, the point of view of Connie. Because Connie is a mother who lost her child to social services because she was too poor to take care of her child, and also she was violent one time.
She broke her
yes.
What is it in English?
Her wrist.
Wrist.
Yes, and so she was deemed unable to take care of her child. She's also mourning an abortion and a forced hysterectomy that was performed on her after the abortion. And so when she, in the chapter, when she discovers the aquariums, the incubators where the babies are created, she is horrified. We studied that chapter with my students, and I asked them to study Connie's point of view and why she would see it that way.
Because it's a representation of her uterus take out and put on display into the aquarium.
Motherhood is something extremely important to her because of her personal history and situation, social situation as a woman of color. And so...
I was saying, the fact that she was a mother was her only pride, her only,
absolutely.
Her only joy.
It remains so throughout the novel, absolutely. And speaking of pride, she also says this about race. She has a hard time assimilating the idea that race has disappeared because, as she says, in my time, people have just started to reclaim pride for being Latino, for being black, and so that's definitely an issue for her.
Yeah, but Luciente knows that no amount of pride, of reclaiming justice, can actually save people in our time. I guess that the pessimism of the novel is extremely powerful. Also because it is extremely true that Connie loves her daughter, is proud of her motherhood. She tries to be proud of her race, but it is also true that she is forced to embody otherness. You know, she's forced to assimilate all the prejudices that society has. And I was talking about this novel yesterday with a cousin of mine by message. I was telling him, buy the book, it's a really great book. And I told him it's a book where the most excruciating part is not the dystopia, it's not Gildina, because Gildina is unaware of what has been done to society. She had no idea that sky could be blue. She had no idea that she could reclaim some kind of autonomy or independence in her life. The real dystopia is Connie present. Is Connie's present. And you know, the more you read, the more you feel sick about all the injustice that she had to endure and all the levels, all the intersectionality of the injustice that she has to endure. Because, as I was saying, she is poor, so there is an economic abuse on her. She's of Latin American origin, so there is a racial prejudice. She's a woman, so there are all the patriarchal, misogynist prejudice against her. And she has to find a way to survive. And the fact that Piercy remains in the uncertainty, the end of the novel, is another proof of her pessimism. Because I'm pessimistic too, so I simply think that Connie actually is ill, so she killed people, but she never talked with Luciente. And Piercy gives the reader the choice. Do you think that Connie actually fight for a better world because she was talking to Luciente, or Luciente simply is a vision of her mental disorder?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And since I guess the deepest analysis is on our present, it's a way to say that utopian dystopian are something that we can create, but for now we are simply doomed into a polluted, toxic, and violent and abusive reality.
Well, dystopias are always kind of a commentary on our present time.
Yeah,
right?
of course. All the time it's simply something moved, pushed into future or in parallel worlds. But dystopia is talking to us. It's talking about our time, our menaces, our crimes. They simply find a really theatrical way to express this critique. Think about The Handmaid's Tale. Margaret Atwood has repeatedly told that she never invented anything for the novel. That everything that we read in the book, from rape to the abduction of children, victim blaming, everything is already happened, and everything is happening right now in front of our eyes.
And this leads me to my second question, because I was also, it kind of echoes what Marie was saying earlier about the relevance of the utopian genre today. Can we still write utopias today? Does it make sense? And do we still find, utopias that are not completely satirical, ironic, or critical? There was a very interesting conference last year in Paris called Ecological Grief in the Literature and the Arts of the Anglophone World, and we were talking about the fact that we can no longer write elegies, for instance.
Sorry, it's my phone. I forgot to.
Go ahead. It's okay. And in this conference, we were talking about the fact that we can no longer write elegies anymore, with the eco-mourning and the eco-anxiety of our times, and in front of, in the face of the loss, the environmental loss and ecological disasters. And I'm wondering about the relevance of the utopian genre today, as opposed to, you were talking about the 60s and 70s, and it kind of feels to me like this was a very specific time, but more like a sort of, a parenthesis. I was wondering if you wanted to comment on that.
I think all the utopian scholars in the world will hate me for my answer, but I think, of course, we can still write utopia. It's also the right time to promote new alternative positive models. But I am a dystopian scholar, so I think that dystopia in general is more effective than utopia to warn people against what is happening in our society right now. Of course, there is always a reason to write an utopia, and right now, since we are seeing a rise in far-right policies, an annihilation of rights, critical awareness, we are in a world that desperately needs more utopias to be written. And as I was saying, the solar punk is an alternative right now, and it is starting to spread all over the world. But at the same time, I think that dystopia is always more powerful, because maybe the fear of what could happen is more painful than reading something that can comfort us and giving us the hope to that everything will be fine at the end. It is, of course, always time for a critical utopia like A Woman on the Edge of Time, because, as I was saying, she plays with both genres, so there is no a happy ending, there is nothing so comforting about. And I love that dystopia is able to to scare us and to give us a reason to fight, because we are still in time to save the future and not ending up as all the desperate people trapped into dystopia. We are still in time to avoid Gildina being a reality. And in doing so, we can also save Connie from her not fictional dystopia.
Thank you.
To you.
Thanks. Well, firstly, thank you very much for this interesting talk and for coming all the way from Spain to give it to us, and also thank you to Lisa for engaging also in the novel. It's obviously something you know very well as well. I had a question more just as a film fan. It's a bit of a tangent. I was really interested in the part about the idea that every utopia must have a kind of dystopia associated with it, and the example that you gave of Zone of Interest, which is not obviously a sci-fi film, but it's just such an interesting illustration of that idea. And I was just wondering, and it's a bit of a tangent here, but I wondered if you had seen, I imagine probably you have because you're interested in sci-fi films, but if you'd seen Under the Skin by Jonathan Glazer, and also if any of those ideas about otherness and gender that you talked about more broadly could be applied to that film. Have you not seen that one?
No.
Oh, you'd love it. I don't know, Lisa, would you like to respond? I mean, if you've seen it.
Is it the film with Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how to talk about it without revealing the whole
thing. Yeah. I think you'd like it. I think because in thinking about in terms of otherness and gender, I mean, it's about an extraterrestrial who comes down to Earth.
Maybe I remember something, and I'm not sure. When did it come out?
It's very
So
recent.
2013, maybe 2011. But it's Jonathan Glazer's previous film just before...
maybe I've seen it, but I don't recall it right now. I remember Scarlett Johansson, maybe with a short blonde hair.
Driving a car.
Driving
a truck around.
I cannot correctly answer.
Oh,
this
okay. No,
question. But regarding cinema in general, or comics, by the way, of course, there is a parallel between utopia and dystopia. I always jokes about right now in Italy or in the US, supremacist people are living their utopian dream. The problem is what we consider utopia and what we consider dystopia. And since we are actually seeing a lot of debate on the meanings of words, we are changing the meanings of words. For example, being woke was something positive. Now there is a strong propaganda that is trying to make people believe that be conscious about what reality is and try to give voice to everything. It's something repressive, or is some, we are living in a really complicated time that is as everything and the opposite of everything at the same times. So what do we consider utopia? I guess in this room, if we can give one definition, we will have 10 different definitions, but all of them will be, I guess, be supportive of inclusion, empowering, equal rights. We could do the same question to another group of people from a different ideological perspective, and they will give us the opposite. Like I imagine, like protection, strengthen the values of family and stuff like that. Everything can be changed in base of the perspectives. And of course, when we saw dystopia on screen, it's easier. because we can visually see the differences. Regarding the zone of interest, I loved all the contrasts between all the utopic scenes opposed to the dystopian one in the concentration camp.
Well, the dystopian stuff is sort of, it's all pushed to the margins. We don't really see it, but we know it's there.
We know that there is something.
Yeah.
We perceive something. We perceive the fog, we perceive the smoke, but we never see the evil around us. And I guess this is also extremely simple, because we are used to believe that our space is the right one, and we are pushed or forced to perceive our world as the good one, as the perfect one.
So there was a second, probably a shorter or simpler kind of film-based question, because it also interested me that you talked about THX 1138. Now, I was wondering if there was any potential influence from the film onto the novel, because it came out maybe a few years before.
71.
71, although it wasn't a big success when it first came out, because it was badly managed by the studio, who didn't really like it, and I think it became a cult film.
It was
later.
also a strange kind of
Well, it was very experimental
of movie, and I really love THX 1138.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
In particular, I love all the religious suggestion to buy, to produce,
right.
Anticipating a little bit what will happen in They Live. By obey, reproduce.
Yeah, with the glasses. But I was just wondering.
I'm not sure what Piercy read before, but THX 1138, Brave New World, Ecotopia, The Dispossessed, they all have elements in common that we can find in Woman on the Edge of Time.
Yeah, I was just struck by the idea of the androgyny.
Yeah.
And yet that's expressed in the film as a very dystopian idea, but in the novel it's this kind of slightly provocative utopia, as we were saying, but a kind of critical utopia. But I was just interested how she might have been, I don't know,
I guess
using dystopian ideas and co-opting them.
We are talking about two products of the United States of the 70s, so I guess that there is a connection. Also because, as you were saying, there are a lot of similarity between the movie and the novel, the homologation, the androgyny, this idea of desentimentalization of sexuality. So they have families like like three throuple, we could say. There are three queer members of the family, and in THX 1138 they can have sex, but they cannot feel love for each other, and the pregnancy of the protagonist became a reason for a murder. So there are a lot of connection, and I repeat, I guess all in the 70s there are a lot of tropes that constantly repeat themselves.
Yeah, no, it comes back to the idea that we were saying, that it's also a novel of its time, even though it clearly has a lot of timeless qualities, because it seems still very, very relevant now, obviously, the way things are at the moment in society. But it does also seem to be, I mean, I haven't read the novel, I'm sorry, but it does seem to me a very 70s novel in other ways, which is interesting. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
The background and the style are 70s style novel, while some topics are timeless.
Right.
So and I think one of the sources...
We, by Zamyatin, is a source for Brave New World, from THX, for Woman on the Edge of Time. I haven't mentioned here, but also there is this kind of deep homologation where all the people works and function simultaneously with all the other lives around. That is a little bit, they try to, it's a theme that comes back and pops up often. Sorry.
I think one of the sources of inspiration also for Piercy, but also for other feminist science fiction writers is the non-fiction of the women's movement. What the world could look like without gender, without racial oppression.
So second generation feminism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which was extremely productive at that time. They wrote a lot of texts.
She anticipated the concept of intersectionality by almost 15 years, but we already can see all the interconnection level
of the thing
violence.
that I argued in my PhD is that there are many intertextual sources that are fictional in the utopian, dystopian tradition of feminist writing, but also intertextual connections with feminist essays, journals, blogs, magazines.
Utopia never. It was never just a fiction, a fictional genre. It started proposing, effectively influenced the history.
Literary.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. It's philosophical, it's socio-political. Everything we read, as I was saying, also regarding the economy. She interiorized all the fights for the growth, for sustainability, for women's and racial empowering.
Definitely.
So it's a mix between fiction and socio-political critique, and
which is why it
really
may sound
a really
like
strong one.
A very literal application of the radical feminist movement of the 70s. But I think what redeems the novel and makes it very interesting from today's readership is that play between the critical point of view of the character and the projection in a utopian future. That's really this dialogue, I think, that prevents the novel from being a caricature.
Yeah, and also because it's so terribly sad what happens in Connie's life, and while you can perceive the satirical part in almost all the dystopian novels, when she talks about Connie, there is no satire, because we are witness of a structural injustice, of a system that has done this since the beginning of time, against any kind of otherness that is not so strong, there's not so much power to defend themselves. And this is the saddest and the strongest part, I guess, of the novel.
So first of all, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for coming.
You mentioned that the book sold out quickly. How was this novel received in the media? Did they interpret it as a political commentary, or simply as a sci-fi-like novel?
Okay, can you repeat me the question?
Oh,
Sorry.
Of course. My question was, how was this novel received in the media? Was it received like a political commentary or simply as a sci-fi-like novel?
Okay, the novel was not a really successful novel in the 70s. It was not one of her most reading novels. As I was saying, she received the Arthur C. Clarke Prize in 1993. So it's been like more than 20 years between Woman on the Edge of Time and her most acclaimed work. But the novel was critically presented as a socio-political critique of society. And especially in the 70s, it follows this utopian Renaissance movement that tried to connect utopia with more practical reflection on our society. For example, I also mentioned Ecotopia. Ecotopia is almost it seems really like an essay at some point, one by Kallenbach. So there are a lot of novels who try to propose utopian visions and to promote socio-political activism using the escamotage of the novel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from our audience online? All right.
Yeah. Thank you also to the online people.
Well, in that case, we'd like to thank you for
Thank you so much for having me.
Very
It's been a
interesting
pleasure.
discussion and this fascinating talk. It was a pleasure having you.
I want to read your thesis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we have to
Thank
do
you, everyone.
we have to do the clap. Okay. To stop.